I want to thank everyone. Ever since I came back, everyone has been very kind and generous. So thank you so much. And this goes for all, from the priests to the servants to the people. I'm very grateful to you guys. The readings for today actually paint a beautiful picture for us, starting actually with yesterday. So the readings start with Vespers. In Vespers, we read the gospel, a part of the Gospel of John, where Christ heals the son of a man, a dying son of a man who comes to him and begs Christ. But Christ tells him, unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe, kind of questioning their belief. Later on, as the man kind of persists, Christ tells him, go your way, your son lives. And the man believed the word that Jesus spoke and went his way. He believed without seeing his son. The psalm for that gospel is actually really interesting. It says, Lord, who may abide in your tabernacle? Who may dwell in your holy hill? Who walks uprightly, works righteous, and speaks in truth. So the gospel is more about believing. The psalm is about who's going to be in your house, who can see you, Lord. And he says he has truth in his heart. In Matins, we also see a similar theme. The gospel is about believing. It's actually from John chapter 3 with the conversation with Nicodemus. Christ says, for God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world. He who believes in him is not condemned, but he who does not believe is condemned already. So he who believes will not be condemned. He who does not believe is condemned already. The psalm, we see a very similar pattern as the Vespers. It says, who may ascend into the hills of the Lord, or who may stand in the holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. So very similar to Vespers. So kind of Vespers and Matins were about believing, who can stand in the Lord, in the house of the Lord, before the Lord, and about being pure in heart. The liturgy we see in the Pauline epistle, Abraham giving the tithes to Melchizedek. In the Catholic, we see St. John give us a new commandment, love one another. In the Praxis, in the Acts, we see the Lord tell Paul, do not be afraid, but speak, don't keep silent, keep doing what you're doing, don't be afraid. And finally, we get to the Psalm, and it's about giving again, like the Pauline epistle. It says, give to the Lord the glory due to his name, bring an offering and come into his courts. And finally, the gospel is about feeding the multitude. Now, how are all these things related? So from the Vespers and Matins about believing, we get giving, we get love, we get being before the Lord. All these themes, how are they all tied? And especially, how are they tied with the gospel of today for the 5,000? Before we can answer that question, actually, we have to go to the gospel from last time. The gospel from last time is after this gospel. When I was in Arabic liturgy, actually, Abuna kind of gave a very beautiful sermon on it. The gospel for last time, after the multitude is fed, they go and find Christ, but Christ knows they're just coming because they want more food, they want more stuff. And Abuna asked the question in the Arabic sermon last week, why are we following Jesus? Why are we following Jesus? It was a beautiful sermon. I won't repeat it, but it was very nice. The theme for today is even more basic than that. One more question. Are we following Jesus? Are we even following him? Can we see him? In order to follow someone, you see someone and you walk behind him. Are we doing that? In the gospel and the readings, especially in the Psalms, say in order to do that, before we can even stand in the presence of God, there's one criteria, which is the purity of heart. In the Psalm from the Vespers, it tells us who may abide in your tabernacle, who may dwell in your hill, and it answers that question, he who speaks the truth in his heart. And in the morning, who may ascend into your hills, O Lord? He who has clean hands and pure heart. And in here, the most basic question, are we following Christ? Are we even seeing him to be following him? Comes in one word. Are we pure in heart? And the readings give us 4 aspects, or 4 criterias, if you will, of what that looks like. What is a pure heart? We start with a believing heart. We start with a believing heart in the Gospel of Vespers and Gospel of Matins. A pure heart is a heart that trusts God with all its being, believes in God with all its being, in the thin, in the thick. In Matins, Christ tells us, he who believes in him is not condemned. He who has a believing heart is not going to be condemned. Not just in what he does, but in who he is. We don't just trust God for what he does, like the people. They just saw him do miracles, and they're like, okay, yeah, this is a miracle worker. He's going to keep us well fed. No, we believe in God. We trust him for who he is, for what we know about him, for that we know he's good. That's kind of the Gospel of Vespers and Matins tell us. The second criteria is a loving heart. A pure heart is a loving heart. St. John tells us this in the Catholic epistles, when he tells a commandment of the Father is to love one another. The third one, and this is probably the big one in the scripture today, is a pure heart is a giving heart. It's a giving heart. In the Pauline epistle, St. Paul tells us the story of how Abraham gave the tenth of everything he has to Melchizedek. In the psalm of today, we say, give to the Lord, bring offering into his courts. A pure heart is a giving heart. Now, one thing in Christianity that might be different, and this might sound a little harsh, but Christianity is an all or nothing religion. That's what it is. It's all or nothing. There is no verse in the Bible that says, love the Lord with like 75% of your heart. It doesn't exist. There is nothing that says, you know what, don't forget everything, but yeah, I need keep 50% in your heart and come follow me. It doesn't exist. It's love the Lord from all your heart. Forget everything, carry your cross and follow me. Christianity is an all or nothing religion. We're either giving 100% or we're not. We're either Christians or we're not. There is no okay Christian, there is no in between. We're either following Christ or we're not. We're either going to heaven or we're not. There is no middle. There is no middle. Now, I want to be very clear. When I say giving 100%, obviously I don't mean 100% of what we have. We can't give 100% of what we have and go all become monks. It's not going to work, right? Christianity would come to a stalling halt. It's not necessarily giving 1% of what 100% of what we have. It's giving 100% of what we can. What we can give, if we don't give that to God fully and wholly, St. James actually might consider that as a sin. St. James tells us if anyone can do good and doesn't do it, that's a sin. That's a sin in St. James' understanding. So giving 100%, not necessarily of what we have. Obviously, some things we can give away. And there's been people, even in the New Testament, that fell in this trap, like Ananias and Sapphira. But it's giving 100% of what we can give. What we can give. And it's not just about money, obviously. Money is part of it, but it's not just about money. It's giving 100% to God of our heart, our purity, our desires, our time, and more importantly, our life. Giving 100% to God. Now, this is actually a very good opportunity because starting from tomorrow is going to be Jonah's fast. So for 3 days, we have a very good opportunity to kind of give 100% to God. How much can we give? 100% of what we can. You know, fasting, praying, reading the Bible. It's a very nice break before the Great Lent in a couple of weeks. But 100% can look a lot different for a lot of different people. When I used to deal with people that have never read the Bible, they've never opened it. Sometimes I would tell them, you know what, set an alarm, even 2 minutes. If you're doing 0 right now, set an alarm for 2 minutes and just focus 100% on the Bible for those 2 minutes. Anything is better than 0. If we are doing 0, if we're not praying at all, if there are days when we're not praying at all, or there are days when we're not reading the Bible at all, then there's no way we can convince ourselves that we're giving 100%. No way. It's probably 0%. Anything is better than 0. Let's start even with 2 minutes and give 100% in those 2 minutes and go from there if we're not reading the Bible. Let's start with praying. Let's start with fasting. Jonah's is a great fast because it's very short. It's just 3 days. And there's a liturgy here every day. So giving to God. So far we said a pure heart is a believing heart, a loving heart, a giving heart, and finally, a fearless heart. This comes from the Praxis, from the Acts today. The Lord comes to Paul when he's in Corinth and he tells him, do not be afraid. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm with you. Keep serving. Keep going. 2 things usually actually prevent us from giving. Greed and fear. Greed and fear. Greed is, I want this. Or the more dangerous one, I deserve this. The 3 most dangerous words in the English language. I deserve this. I'm entitled to this. How dare you not give me this? And then the other one is fear. Fear of not having enough, fear of not fitting in, fear of embarrassment, fear of failure. The list goes on. But those are the 4 things that give us a pure heart. A believing heart, a loving heart, a giving heart, and a fearless heart, according to the scriptures today. Obviously, there's more we can go on. A pure heart is like a lifelong lesson for all of us, but those are kind of the ones highlighted in the scriptures today. Now, we come to the gospel, and in the gospel, we see a very important character that kind of sums all those characteristics together. We don't even know his name or age. It's a very young boy who comes up, and he gives everything that he can give, 5 loaves and 2 fishes, to the disciples who give him to Jesus. That boy showed a believing heart. He's been sitting there listening to every word that Christ said. Of course, Christ probably talked about giving. It was one of his central messages. And the minute the opportunity came, he gave. He had a loving heart. He must have loved the people around him and thought they deserve that food a lot more than I do. They need it more. They can have it. He had a giving heart. This one goes without explanation. He gave everything he can give. Before he could give the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, he gave his time. He sat there for the whole day listening to Christ. Sometimes we don't even give 2 minutes in certain days, but he gave the whole day along with everyone else. And finally, when the opportunity came, he even gave everything he can in material-wise, the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. And finally, he had a fearless heart. He wasn't scared of, maybe I don't have enough. Maybe I'm going to get hungry later. He didn't care about that. He wasn't scared of not fitting in. Am I the only one giving here? No, I'm not going to do that. That didn't enter his heart either. He was not scared of embarrassment. Going before 5,000 men is not easy. Going before 5,000 men with just 5 loaves and 2 fishes, something that is very little, that someone might make fun of it, is also even more hard. He was not scared of failure. Am I going to waste this? Might go to waste. Who's going to use it? He didn't care about all that. He just gave what he can give, and he gave it to God. Now, the fact that he is a little boy or a little lad is very important. He didn't wait until he said, when I have enough, I'll give. When I'm older, I'll give. When I have a job, I'll give. When I have more time, I'll give more time. No, he didn't do that. He did it now. The time is always right to do what is right. The time is always right to do what is right. And think with me for a second. Think about this little boy. Will he ever forget that day? Never. That day is ingrained in his brain. As he goes through all forms of life, he will never forget the day that Christ used the food that he had to feed the multitude. The time is always right to do what is right. Now let us go back to the question that we kind of asked at the beginning. Are we following Christ? And do we have the purity in heart to show it? Sometimes we let opportunities pass us by simply because we're not ready to give, simply because we're not too ready to be pure in heart. But even if we're not ready, God is ready. He's ready to make us pure in heart. We just have to start. We have to give, and we have to give 100% of what we can give. And He's not just going to change your heart and bless it. He can even give us a new heart completely. In Ezekiel, he tells us, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you the heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. May God bless this upcoming fast of Jonah. May He bless our life. May He give us a new heart. And may we be like that little boy that took everything he can give and gave it in the hand of Christ. No matter what the time is and no matter how much he has, he trusted God with all he has. Glory be to God forever and ever. Amen.